Tell me what this project is called and what the time span that it covers.
The project is called G stands for Go-Betweens. I'm going to get all this the wrong way around. It has a couple of names. It's sort of Anthology Volume 2, G stands for Go-Betweens, and it covers 1985 to 1989. So there's a few.
And how do you, broadly speaking, how would you characterise this period in the Go-Betweens history?
It's where we sort of burst out of a sort of cult status into a sort of bigger cult status. A lot of things happen. Probably a lot of people think this is our best period. Certainly our most volatile, action-packed. A lot happens. We make 3 albums, which is in 4 years, and we break up trying to make a 4th. So it's pretty mad. We're sort of in our most of the band are in their late 20s, and so it's a very vital period, and it's where we sort of break probably into more people's consciousness.
If this was a book, where would this book find our heroes at the beginning?
At the beginning, where we've been living in London for 2.5 years, and so the 4 of us come back at the beginning of 1985. We have no record label to come back to. We've been dropped by Sire. We have no manager, because our manager has quite wisely decided to stay in Australia. Where the 4 of us were like, we've got to go back to London. We want one more shot. We think we can make a great album. We don't want to, not languish in Sydney, but, the World Championship has been played out over there, and we think that we're competitive. So manager stays in Australia, record company has dropped us, and we've got no money, basically. But we've got places to stay, which is a big thing. And so we come back thinking we want to record an album at the end of the year, we want to write it through the year, we want to find a manager, we want to find a record label, we've got to write 10 great songs, and we've basically got about 8 months to do it.
So the chips are down, but
yeah.
you sound pretty confident.
Well, we were, every band bounces off their last record. And so we thought we'd made a classic album with Before Hollywood. We thought that we'd not fudged it a bit, but we hadn't made a great 3rd album. So we thought we've got to make a classic 4th. And we thought we could do it. We thought we'd seen what we'd done wrong on Spring Hill Fair. We'd seen what we'd done right. Like there's clues on Spring Hill Fair, what we could, especially for me as a songwriter. It was like Drain the Pool Part Company worked. Other songs didn't work so well. I've got to stay on that sort of mode. And Grant would have been able to give you now a very similar, that worked, that didn't work. That's what he's got to do. Do you know what I mean? So we both, the songwriters and the band knew as well, this is what we've got to do. There was very much we'd been screwed around a bit by Rough Trade at the end. We'd been screwed around by Sire with Spring Hill Fair. So there was a feeling of like, we're going to take it back ourselves. We're not going to work with a producer. We're going to work with an engineer. We're going to take control of our career. That was the feeling.
And was it as easily done as it was said? Was it?
It was in a way. It worked out that year. We had a very good 1985.
Tell me about the Elektra deal.
We were doing demos for the very first time, and on the anthology are the demos that we did. We did two sets of demos because we got a manager, Bob Johnson, and his idea was, let's make demos and let's see if someone in London is going to bite. And we'd never done demos before to get on a record label. You know, like Rough Trade approached us, Postcard approached us. We never had to do a demo to get a record deal. And suddenly we had to do them. And we were fine with that. And so we did 2 sessions with 4 songs, just about the middle of the year. And no one really, there were great demos. Like one of them is really, really good. And so Elektra had just started, and it was like Sire, unfortunately, in that it was an incredible, prestigious US label starts up the boutique European label. You know, this is obviously the middle 80s, there's money everywhere. And so they open an office. And so a fellow by the name of Simon Potts was put in charge of this. He signed 2 acts. One was the Go-Betweens, the other was Simply Red. One of them became very successful. And so he signed 2 acts, and then, I don't know, whatever happened, he gave us the money, we're in the studio, and then the whole thing blew up. It was like over. And like, we were like, the label lasted for about 3 months or 2 months. And so suddenly we're in the middle of a record doing Liberty Bell and the Black Diamond Express around October 85. And like, we were just told one day, it's over.
What did Elektra think they had with you? What kind of a band did they think they'd signed?
I think they thought they'd signed a, you know, like the demo, like on the demos, there was Spring Rain and Head Full of Steam. So that was melodic, pop. Grant had some really good songs, The Wrong Road, you know, like Core of a Flame. So there was a lot of the songs that ended up on Liberty Bell were recorded well in demo form. And I think they must have thought, okay, we're not getting the Thompson Twins or Erasure, but we're getting a rock band that's got songs, and you know, the label's just starting up, let's see how it goes. Maybe we were like that, you know, like, let's sign a really good rock band. And of course we were thrilled because Elektra is love, The Door, you know, like, it's just a dream. It's you know, one of the most, you know, it's a legendary, I mean, it's amazing. So we were very enthusiastic, but it just collapsed.
But it wasn't to be.
No.
Tell us what you've got and you know, what's going on there.
This is a Beggar's Banquet copy of our 4th album. So we signed to them. So Elektra goes, Simon managed to give us some money to finish the album on a personal level. And then when we were going to sign to a label with the record finished, he'd be paid back. And that's what happened. He gave us some money to finish the record, and then we were signed to Beggar's Banquet. This is our manager's office, which was in South Kensington, and that was the couch. The office had 2 rooms, so there's one room with phones and, you know, fax machines and things like that, and then there was another room which was like a sitting room, and that couch was there. So it's taken in that manager's office. I mean, what I think is good about it, we're happy, and it reflects that. If it only says one thing, it's like, we've done it. You know, like we came back in '85 with nothing, and we've made our best album. This is our best album that we'd made, although Before Hollywood has a very strong place in my heart. But this is our best album, I'd say, of the first 4, and one of the very best we ever made, one of the best 2 or 3, or 1 or 2. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the record saw you, both you and Grant, I think, you know, sort of find new areas in your kind of songwriting world that were, you both evolved noticeably as songwriters.
That's true.
What were the songs where you thought, wow, I've really upped my game here?
I think the first thing was for me that I'd actually written 5 songs that I liked. I think that was the upping of my game, that I liked the whole 5. I thought they were really good. And also, there was a feeling like the last single, the big single off Spring Hill Fair was Bachelor Kisses. And then the one off before Hollywood was Cattle and Cane. and the one before that really off Send Me a Lullaby off the first album called Your Turn, My Turn, Grant wrote most of that. So Grant had written almost the last 3 singles. And I really, there was really a moment where I just thought, hello, like I used to be the pop guy. Like I wrote Lee Remick, I wrote People Say, I wrote I Need Two Heads. And it was like I'd forgotten it. Do you know what I mean? And I just sort of set out, and you can set out to write pop songs and you don't write them. They don't come. But it really worked. And I wrote Spring Rain and Head Full of Steam in about a month, in June. And I just sort of wanted to put myself in that position. And then Grant, amazingly enough, like on one of the demos, a second demo, like it's the first recordings of Spring Rain and Head Full of Steam. And Grant brings along The Wrong Road, which is like a waltz thing that goes for 4.5 minutes, which, like if you're following the band for the last 2 albums, suddenly it's like, it turns, So I was very happy about that. That was something that I really tried for. I thought it was, like time that I wrote. I just wanted to do it, write pop songs again.
Were you trying to impress each other? Was there an element of that?
Always, I think. And I think that we'd bounce off each other. He'd play me songs beforehand, and I'd go, "Oh, we need 4 minutes of weirdness for the album. I need to write something that's a little bit over there. I've got songs that are here. He's got songs that are there, and occasionally I can remember, oh, I need to do that."
On Liberty Bell, which of your songs do you remember being especially impressive to him, and which of his songs were you, I guess you partly answered this already, were you immediately impressed by?
The Wrong Road I thought was an amazing song. He hadn't really written anything like that, because it's got about 7 or 8 verses. And basically we're very much in the 3 verses world. And so for him to write something that goes round and round and has these verses and builds up this whole picture of being on the fringes of London, with no money and ambition. And so for him to write something like that, lyrically it's amazing. A lot of lines from that still, I get quoted back, I see. It's probably his greatest lyric, actually. I think he was very happy. If you listen to his guitar playing on Spring Rain and Head Full of Steam, there's just, Grant's got all these pop hooks, It reminded me a little bit of, his playing, and what he did was a little bit like, I hope I get the name right, like James Honeyman Scott, from The Pretenders. Like Chrissy would probably strum, and James Honeyman Scott would just be like, the riff maniac, and just coming up with all that stuff. And when I listen to the tracks now, or like over the last years, I hear he's doing the same thing. Like that. I was just really strumming the chords, and he was like every section a new bit that was just gorgeous, and so it really raised those songs.
And which of your songs do you think impressed him the most on the record?
I think he liked Twin Layers of Lightning. I think his guitar playing again on that was amazing. We didn't verbalise too much between each other. Like we're uptight guys, so there's not, oh, that's good, that's great. But his guitar playing on the record, on my songs, is unbelievable. And his guitar playing on Twin Layers is, out of this world.
Twin Layers of Lightning sounds like a sort of précis of a film.
Right, yeah.
Is it? Who's it about?
Basically, it's very straight story of Lindy and I. Like it's our relationship by this time is getting quite frayed, and it is that sort of like people would invite us around to their places, and like anything could happen.
What did happen?
Oh, just not really arguments, but we were just sort of volatile around each other. She's a volatile person, and I think we'd sort of, like it was, and so it was that, like almost like the relationship was a microcosm of the band. Like we're sort of struggling in London, we're trying to get by, we're trying to make money, we're trying to survive, and you could say all of that about the relationship as well. And so, and we'd sort of come together in Brisbane in 1980, and like she was 6 years older than me. And so now it's late 85, and so now I'm in my late 20s, and so she's in her mid-30s, so it's a whole other dynamic. And, like, throw a couple of bottles of wine into that, and anything could happen. But yeah, like I'm dramatising it a bit, because like you need to do that
in order to write the song.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what that song is. It's all just London. Like it really does start. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it starts with like walking down the street and there's a Mercedes parked in our street. Like that really happened, like we're in Highbury Grange, and at that time that was an exotic thing, and I can remember just seeing that car, and like I must have made a note of it in my thing, and so that sort of clicked something, this Mercedes suddenly parked in our street. It just started with a little bit of business, almost like that, and then
it's an establishing shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Liberty Bell came out. Were you happy with where it left you as a band in terms of your profile, your success?
Yeah, it was. It got good reviews. We made a really good video for Spring Rain, and that helped, especially in Australia. It was like the first good video we made, and we're in the video age, so that was good. And yeah, I thought we were. See, this is the thing about the Go-Betweens and in this period that we're talking about, is it's not an era of rock bands. Do you know what I mean? It's an era of, new pop is still big. It's an era when hip hop is coming through. It's an era where, people are probably making, like US, like hardcore's coming through, pre-grunge. So there's a lot of different, someone like Prince and Madonna and Springsteen are big. So like being in a, like we're making music and we're doing something that is not the main focus. And so, yeah, we make a great rock record. In other times it might have taken us further, but culturally and where, especially in the UK where we were, rock is not the main thing.
So you adjust your expectations accordingly.
We did, and very happy with the record.
Okay. I'm going to give you Tallulah.
All right, okay.
I want you to just present it
to
the world and tell us a little bit about the kind of mental pictures that it kind of throws up.
New member of the band, Amanda Brown. again, we're sort of around couches. There was a well-known London photographer called Peter Anderson, who was very popular at that time. He took a lot of good shots. I can remember we did one session that we were trying to get a cover, and it didn't work. So a couple of days later, we went back. And in that time, I dyed my hair blonde. So there's a whole lot of sessions. You'll see them in the box set, where there's a whole session. They're great shots. I've got black hair, and we all pretty much look the same. And in that time, in that week or two, I dyed my hair blonde. And so this has taken, what Grant's doing is, it's a Dylan quote. There's I know what it's from. It could be from the Basement Tapes album. There's someone playing a violin like that. I don't know if it's Dylan or someone else. Anyway, Grant's doing a Dylan reference there. And yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting looking band.
How did it change? So tell me about the process by which Amanda came to join the group.
Okay. When we did Liberty Bell, we brought in strings. This was Grant's idea, and so we had a string quartet led by a woman called Audrey Riley, who was a friend of the engineer Richard Preston. Richard sort of was connected. He was the engineer, connected with London musicians, a little bit more than what we were. So he went, "Oh, you want strings? I know this young woman called Audrey Riley, and she can do it." Audrey's gone on, she does Coldplay records and all of this. She's had a very big career over the last. But this was, Liberty Bell was the first album she ever did string arrangements for. And so then when we went out to Australia to tour, we saw Amanda play with an old friend of ours. And they were like a two-piece in this sort of King's Cross cafe that I was there, Lindy was there, Robert Vickers was there, I don't know if Grant was there. And we saw them play. There would have been 20 people. And Amanda was amazing. Like her violin playing was incredible. And then while we were there, Grant and I were flown back to London to do interviews for Liberty Bell. And while we were away, Lindy invited Amanda to play some shows with us live. And these were mainly in Sydney. So suddenly we're playing in Sydney, we're on the Australian tour, and Amanda walks on stage and starts to play some, like some of the songs off Liberty Bell and a couple of other songs from our back catalogue.
Had you not rehearsed with Amanda prior to
Yeah,
this?
no, we had, sorry. So we'd had a couple of practices with her. She came on, she was going to do like 6 songs or something like that. And 2 things happened. We realised it just lifted the band, and the crowd adored it, and it just broadened our sound. Suddenly, like with 2 guitars, bass and drums, which we were, that's fairly standard. And we were good at it, and we had great songs, but 2 guitars, bass and drums, and violin is like, well, there's no one like that. And so she was like a fantastic addition to the band. So she came back over, so we asked her to join, she did, and she came back to the UK with us and joined the band. So there she is there. And she actually does this writing. That's her.
That's right. Oh, okay.
That's her handwriting. And so it was, like it was, this was, I can be too critical of this album, okay? And I've learnt to shut my mouth. So, and I do really like it. It's the one album in our catalogue where I think it could have been a little bit different and a little bit bigger and wilder and crazier and gorgeous. But anyway, that didn't happen.
But there was a kind of thinking behind getting Craig Leon to produce some of the songs.
Yeah,
wasn't there?
there was like we'd done Liberty Bell. That was like a handmade album, and it was like there was a feeling from Beggars, probably within ourselves. Like we were still basically on the street, and it was like, let's try for a hit single, and everyone was up for it. Everyone thought that we could do it. Like it's not like we were an avant-garde group, and so. But unfortunately, I didn't have any pop songs. It wasn't. I didn't have. Oh, here's Spring Rain. Here's Head Full of Steam. I had the House Jack Kerouac belt and the Clark Sisters. I mean, that's not chart material. And Grant had Right Here, but he didn't really have anything else either. It just we at the moment we decided, and it was the right moment. We just didn't have the material, and so we went through with it, and we got Craig Leon and Castle Webb were the producers, and we went into Good Earth Studios in which was owned by Tony Visconti, which used to be in Soho, and it wasn't a pleasant session. We ran smack up against modern pop, so everything's programmed. Like Craig's got a big keyboard. We just walk into the studio on the first day and he's got a keyboard as big as this table in front of the mixing board, and basically he's playing the bass lines and we're like, and that was it. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. And then all the money that we spent on that session meant that then the record, we weren't in the best studios to make it. It just sort of lopsided everything. But we tried it, and it was bruising for the band. And also it means that to me there's 2 tracks on this album, Right Here and Cut It Out, that don't sound like any other tracks on the album. So it's like, how does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? But there's enough good songs on this, and the band is amazing. So the record pulls through.
What?
I'm being tough.
It's a chronicle of what the records. To me, as an outsider listening to these songs, it sounds like by and large a chronicle of a turbulent time.
Yeah. That's yeah.
What are the clues? If we're talking about songs, what are the clues to that?
Well, I think the main clue is that it's a very disparate group of songs. I don't know where Grant's head's at. He's got Someone Else's Wife, which is this really weird, not one of my favourite songs of his. This weird sort of ballad. I can't understand it lyrically at all. What that means. Then he's got Hope Then Strife, which is this sort of very slow ballad with this big chorus set in Tangiers. And then he writes Bye Bye Pride, which is one of the greatest songs he ever wrote. He's got Cut It Out, which is sort of this, which has not been well recorded, and it's this sort of stilted, funky thing. And then he's got a great pop song with Right Here. I mean, that's a very weird.
Yeah, I mean, Right Here and Cut It Out, if we just set those aside for a second, we've got this trio of very kind of novelistic sort of songs. Who was he trying to emulate, do you think?
I really don't know. I mean, that was always a thing with Grant, was that he was very prolific, and he could come up with anything, like, and that was right to the end. He could write something that was like almost, and he'd be serious, almost like a parody of something, like a doo-wop song or a parody of a Stones song. He'd sit there and say to me, this next song I'm going to play to you, it's like Stonesy. And then he'd play you a version of Jumpin' Jack Flash, like with different lyrics. And then, but with a straight face, and he was serious. Then he'd play you an incredible song. And like just completely cut from its own cloth, completely him. And I think basically he was so melodic. Like McCartney's the same. McCartney can just go right off script and just sort of, because he's so melodic, it's like, I'll follow that, and it's like a polka. I'll follow that, and it's like a country track, and then McCartney will come back and write, like Back in the USSR or Lady Madonna, and you go, well, that's what you're good at. But then he'll go off and, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Grant was a little bit the same. And so like with me, I'd probably only had 5 songs to his 15, and so mine were a little bit more of one thing, maybe. But mine are very bit scattered there as well, and I think it's. But a lot of people like the album, you know. Like I can't be too critical of it.
You're a little bit like.
Say it.
You're a little bit like ABBA at the end of 1978.
Right.
Two of you in love.
Yeah.
And then the two of you have just kind of recently split up.
Yeah.
How did that affect things, both artistically and in other ways?
Look, I think it. I think that can be over-egged. I think bands. People see relationships and think it's a soap opera. I think you learn through constant touring and being in the bus together and being in airports together and being in studios together, you work it out. And really, you know you've got to play it down. And you know you can't couple up on stuff because it's going to piss off the rest of the band. So I think it can be over-exaggerated a little bit. But I think what it did probably at that time was you know, like Grant, by this stage, you know, Grant and Amanda come together in 1986, I think. And so I've known Grant for 8 years in the band, and he's been in no relationship that I've seen. I've never been introduced to a girlfriend. And so suddenly he's got a girlfriend and she's in the band. And Lindy and I have broken up. So of course that creates changes in terms of how we were. I was very happy for him and for Amanda. You know, like I thought that was great. It made Grant very content, and Amanda and him always conducted themselves fantastically, and there was just, you know, it was smooth. It made Lindy and I a little bit more volatile because suddenly we're single, you know, like, and so it's a little bit more frayed.
This was the closest you got to living a kind of lifestyle that was kind of maybe the closest you got to the kind of rock star template.
Yeah, it is. And do you mean our behaviour? Yeah, it was for me. I mean, we were a very powerful, charismatic band. And when you feel that, you I think you've got to go for it. You know, it's like, well, you know, like, I'm not saying we were like, but it's like the Stones, you know, like in 67 or 66, an amazing looking band. You can't play that down. You know, like, you've got to walk into rooms and just stun people, on stage and off, you know, just through your own charisma. And like, we're a very charismatic band, and so that you've got to play the hand that you're given. You know.
To extend the Stones analogy.
Yeah, go on.
Were there aspects in which, in terms of the choice of singles, the way the band was suddenly being presented, that maybe you were starting to feel a bit like Brian Jones? Yeah,
I never thought that we'd be gifted a hit single. I thought. I could hear, you know, like, you're hearing it on the radio all the time. So like, we're hearing BBC One, you know, like, we're walking around the streets of London, and, you know, like, it's top 10 just coming at you, and it sounds miles away from what we're doing. So, and I just never thought that we would get a hit. Like, that was my gut. I was happy to go along, and, you know, like, okay, we're in with producers into a studio and whatever. But I never thought that, and so I was at this stage, especially around Tallulah, wanting to, I just wanted us to go into a studio for about 3 days and just mic everything up and just be like we were live.
Tallulah sort of represents the end of a sort of chapter in your story, really, in some ways, doesn't it?
Well, you mean it's the last London? Yeah. We leave London after we do Tallulah. We leave London at the end of 1987, So we'd been here 5.5 years. And really what we had was that we'd got everything we wanted. You know, like when we're talking about coming here in 1985 with nothing. We now had a worldwide record deal. We had a manager. We'd established ourselves with these last 2 albums. So there was a feeling of, why stay in London and stay on 50 quid a week? We're homesick. The story needs to change. It's become a little bit stale.
And everyone agreed about that.
Everyone agreed about that, but Robert Vickers decided he wanted to go back to New York, where he was. He's from Brisbane. He's from our hometown, but his girlfriend was living there, and I think Robert, you know, like in the documentary right here, he thought we were going to break up, you know, because it was so volatile and the band was just so irregular, and I forget his quote from the film. It's like, we weren't a band, we were a dysfunctional family, which is not far off. And so he thought that we'd break up. And so he went back to New York, probably for personal reasons as well, I must add. And the other 4 of us went back to Australia.
Maybe holding up 16 Lovers Lane.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe tell us about what this record represents and maybe how it changed the sound of the band?
Okay. What this record represents and how it changes the band. Okay. Can I just say one thing? Okay. This has always amused me about this album. The 2 best looking people in the band, okay, at this stage, are myself and Amanda Brown, okay? Where are we? We're on the back. But anyway, that aside...
Whose decision was that?
I don't know. I was just given the album and it's like, oh, there I am. But that's, you know, that's show business. But so we do this in Sydney with Mark Wallace. He remixed part of the whole trying to get Tallulah right exercise. He remixed some tracks, and we thought that he just added something new to the sound. It was like, here's the next step, you know. And so, and he'd worked in London for a long time with a producer called Steve Lillywhite, very successful. You'd know what I mean. And so Mark was his engineer. He used to work down the townhouse. And so Mark was wanting to get into production. The last 2 records he'd done before he came down to work with us was Joshua Tree and Naked by Talking Heads. So he came with David Byrne stories, which was great.
Do you remember any of them?
No, he found David very, very strange, and he just talked about him doing vocals and screaming and yelling into the microphone. And you know, for us, you know, being very, oh yeah, that's great, that's the David Byrne we know and love, where I think Mark didn't know David all that well, and so this was quite strange to him. And the other thing is, he'd just done a single by a band called The Primitives, called Crash, which he produced. So we got Mark to come out right at the moment the Crash was going into the top 10 here. We'd seen The Primitives play on the London Creation Records. I'd seen them play. And now they were top 10, you know. And so Mark came out, and like, as opposed to Craig, Leon, and Castlewebb, Mark was a lot more diplomatic, and Mark wanted to weld the band into a whole thing. You know, it was modern recording, but it was like Mark, I guess he had the luxury of doing a whole album, you know, in Craig's defense. Craig's remit, I think that's the word, remit, was hit single, where Mark was, I want to make a great album. And so he came out to Sydney. It was a golden time. Like, we were just sunshine. We had 10 great songs. Grant and I had just written 5 songs that spoke to each other. Like, it was just amazing. We were arms apart. on Tallulah, and then we just sort of came and we played each other his songs, and we were just stunned, you know, like when we just sat down and played them to each other on acoustic guitar. And so, like 10 great songs.
You were like two halves of the same brain, really, you and Grant on this record.
We are. And there were 10 songs that, like, we did a demo for them, and it's on within the anthology. And it's just like, it's like a singer-songwriter record, you know, like we just calmed it all down and just brought it back to 10 quite simple, beautiful songs. And we did it without really talking to each other, you know, like we weren't always checking up on each other. But it was just like, he had his 5 and I had my 5, and they just matched.
What are the standout songs on the record for you?
I think Quiet Heart, you know, like Grant's, I mean, that's just an amazing song. It's his great big ballad, you know, it's all, you know, to Amanda. An amazing song, you know, like, and that's the thing with him is he you know, it just starts with these 2 chords. It's just D to A. I can remember him playing it to me the first time, and he starts strumming D to A, and like, that has been done 10,000 times, you know, and I'm like, how are you going to get anything out of this? And then he's just got this new melody, and then he does a dissension, and then the chorus is D, B minor, G, A, again, it's one of the basis of 50s rock and roll. The Beatles did millions of songs like that as well in their early years, and he gets a new melody out of that, and that's what his ability and greatest strength was, that he could take cliche chord sequences and get something new out of them, and that was just like, and so I thought, like, that was amazing. The Devil's Eye I thought was really good, like a sort of shuffly thing, sort of slight, but really, really good. So, yeah.
And you're sort of, and you're turning in some of your all-time best as well.
Yeah.
With Love Is a Sign.
Yeah.
You Can't Say No Forever. It's
Yeah.
a very unusual song.
Yeah, that one was, yeah. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, was there anything I could do as well? I mean, you know, you're sort of died for your memory.
I'd started to listen to more, I started to listen to more country music. Like in 1987, I got exposed to Graham Parsons and the Emmylou Harris albums. And I can remember listening to them, and it was like, simplicity, right. Emotion, right. And so things like, as much as I love them, like the house Jack Kerouac built, or the Clark Sisters, or Twin Layers of Lightning, those big sort of exotic things. You know, you can't write, you've got to keep moving. And I couldn't keep pastiching that. I didn't want to do that. But I just sort of got exposed. I started listening to Guy Clark as well, the Texas singer-songwriter, Rodney Crowell a bit, and those Graham and Emmylou albums.
There's a sense that you're ready to offer up some songs to the canon.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Yeah, and you know, I was really listening to songs like Love Hurts, or Let It Be Me, you know, like, and just going, you know, like, I could do that. And these songs are really quite simple. Country songs are really quite simple. You know, like at that time, like something like the Happy Mondays, say, who were going on at the same time, that sounded very complicated to me. You know, it was like this jungle of noise where when I heard, you know, like those sort of country songs, especially from the 60s, late 50s, and also like outlaw country, like Jerry Jeff Walker, or, you know, like Red-Headed Stranger by Willie Nelson. I was listening to that, and I was just going, this is just really simple, but it really works, and it's emotive.
Does the sound of 16 Lovers Lane sort of mirror the simplicity of your life at this point?
No, it worried me. When the production worried me, because I thought we could have made that album in Nashville. You know, like we could have made that album in Austin, Texas, you know, like with a pedal steel player in there as well. You know, like that, we could have done that. And so I was a little bit worried that I thought the production was great, but I was a little bit worried that you know, what Grant and I had in the sort of the lyrics and the roughness of the tunes, the beauty of the tunes, was a little bit lost in the beauty of the production, you know. So I was a little bit worried about that. But at the same time, I could hear it was just the lushness. It was just gorgeous. You know, like something like Love Is a Sign is just this, you know, it sounds like something off Pet Sounds, you know, like it's just all this sort of beautiful sort of stuff. And it's just this thing that I had on acoustic guitar, this sort of, I thought it was like something off, you know, Blood in the Tracks. Well, this is the hit that should have been. This is the one time, this is the first single off 16 Lovers Lane.
And probably the last single as well.
Yeah.
Because it was...
Yeah. And this was the one time that I thought that we should have had a hit. Like, this is foolproof. And I thought that, you know, you can go, Bachelor Kisses, yeah, it's good, but doesn't really sound like a hit. Spring Rain's great, but it doesn't really sound, not radio. You know, if Springsteen had done it, you know, with that production, Spring Rain would have been a hit maybe, you know, or, you know, Right Here. But this, the production from Wallace, Mark Wallace, is incredible. The song's incredible. The guitar solo is incredible. You hear it, you know, I hear it occasionally on the radio, and it just sounds like gold.
If it's two questions,
Yeah.
if it's so great,
Yeah.
why did Grant seem shy about showing it to you?
Yeah.
And B, why wasn't it a hit?
I really don't know. I never asked him, you know, which is a little sort of key to our relationship. I really don't know. Maybe he thought, you know, like one part of me thinks he thought I might sneer at it. But he'd shown me really straight ahead pop songs before, you know, like songs that we demoed or, you know, like never went further, that were just like these repetitive 3-chord things that were just like blatant, you know. And so I dismiss that now because I think, well, he'd done, you know, he'd shown me really sort of straightforward pop songs before, and this is a really artful one, you know. And I really don't know why he didn't come over and just go, oh, I've got one more song. I want to show this to Wallace. You know, like I've just written this, hot off the presses. You and I didn't demo this. I've written this last week, and I want to show it to Wallace. And Amanda and I have been playing it at home. She's, you know, and I want to show it to Wallace, and like, here it is. I mean, maybe there wasn't the time. So it's a mystery to me. And why wasn't it a hit? Well, it should have been a hit because the second time round, it got re-released. It got released in October or September '78. Then when we came back here to tour in 1989, sorry, it came out in 1988, September, October. And then it got re-released. Because everyone thought, you know, like, this should be a hit, so let's re-release it. That's the only time that ever happened in our career. And so in May, we're over here. So we're in town, we're on tour, we're doing some support shows with REM, we're doing some shows headlining ourselves. And it gets re-released and it gets A-listed. You know, like, it's being played 13 times a week. And if it had been on Warner's, if it had been on Sony, you know, like, it would have been a hit. They'd have got it there. If you know, there's probably 5 other songs A-listed that week. The other 4 would have been in the top 30. And so to me, it was like, well, we've been talking to Beggar's Banquet, and it wasn't a hit in Australia, and we're on a very good label there. And to me, it was like, well, this is our 16th attempt at, you know, this is, we're never going to do anything, and we give it to you, and you can't get it there after it's A-listed on BBC and it's being played as I'm walking through Soho, you have to ask yourself, what's the point of trying to make these type of records? So why it wasn't a hit is another mystery to me. If it had been on Warner's, it would have been a hit, but Beggars, to be brutally frank, you'd have to say couldn't get it there. So, went to number 68 or something.
And so for a lot of people, this is where the story of the Go-Betweens' first incarnation ends. So I think maybe and one thing that the box set will reveal is that that's not quite the ending, is it? Because one thing that you've been doing is curating all these songs, many of which ended up on yours and Grant's first solo albums,
Sure.
but were putatively destined for one more Go-Betweens record.
Yeah.
So why did that not happen? What story does that tell us?
It tells you that after 16 Lovers Lane, we toured for a year, and it was just like every other album. We finished touring, and then it's like Grant and I have to start writing songs immediately for the next album. So it's like, okay, here we go for the 7th time in a decade. Like, we're coming up to our 7th album in 8 years that Grant and I had to write from scratch. So it wasn't like we'd done 16 Lovers Lane, Streets was a hit, and then it was like at the end we'd tour a couple of months, and then there's your 100,000 or 200,000 pounds, there's your 200,000 pounds, there's your 200,000 pounds. Let's see each other in a year and a half. Bye-bye, everybody. Let's regroup in the Bahamas in August 1992. It was like, next one, writing songs. And so, and like little things happened. I stayed on in Germany, where was the last show with R.E.M.
Because you were in love at this point, weren't you?
Yeah. I started a relationship with Karen Boimler, who I married the next year. So I stayed in Germany for 3 months, and that was the first time we all hadn't been moving around like this since 1978. I'd never spent 3 months away from Grant or Lindy. And so suddenly I'm there. Amanda goes to New York. Grant goes back and has to tell John that he's no longer in the band. So suddenly...
Tell us who John is, sorry.
John Wilstead, the bass player, who'd been on 16 Lovers Lane. And so Grant asked him to leave the band when they went back to Sydney. I stayed in Bavaria. Amanda went to New York. Suddenly we lose a member of the band. So even, things are starting to change. And so we then regrouped back in October in Sydney. And for the first time, there just isn't the momentum. We don't know what record we want to make. Different people want to make different records. Every record before that, it was like, yeah, okay, we're running. We're going to jump the fence. And this was the first time where we were meeting, no one knew who was going to produce it. We didn't know what type of record we were. We were broke. We were really tired. And then, after one practice, Grant just, during a practice, and the practice room was not a pleasant place to be. It had gone back to that volatility of London 1987, when Vickers says, he could see the band breaking up. And I'd been walking out of practices because I didn't like the feeling in the practice room. And so that feeling was back again at the end of 1989. And so you add all of that up, and then Grant just comes up to me and just goes, I want to talk to you after a practice. We go to a bar around the corner, and he just walks in and goes, I want to leave the band. It's over then. That's... I guess I was faced with that.
Were you expecting that?
I knew he was upset in the practice room. He looked at me. There was an incident in the practice room, and Grant looked at me and held my eyes. And it was like, that's it. And he just came up to me, like just Soto voice in the room, and just went, I want to talk to you after the practice. I knew something was on. And then when we met up, he told me, he just said, I want to leave the band.
Do you have any regrets about the way that happened?
No, well, it was messy, but I can't see any other way that it wouldn't have been messy. The band was not cohesive enough to do it all at a band meeting. Band meetings were often unpleasant as well. So I just think that, like Grant wanted to leave the band. I guess there was that moment where I could have said to him, look, I want to stay. I'll do it, I guess. But I immediately said back to Grant, I want to leave as well. So we both wanted to leave the band that we'd started. And so the basic thing then was to tell, and we'd had a new bass player come in, but basically it was to tell Lindy and Amanda that we wanted to break up the band. We'd had enough. Like Grant was saying things to me like, I've never played with anyone else but you. Although then, we decided, we were talking about making a record together. But, I think he'd had a reckoning where he'd just sort of gone, I've had enough of being with this. The problem was that he was in a relationship with Amanda and he was telling me this. And so that was obviously a problem, But he told Amanda, I told Lindy, and that was the end of it.
We've probably got about 2 minutes at the most.
Sure.
Could you just tell me, to sum up the kind of process of curating this particular box set in a kind of hopefully self-contained way, and maybe something that it's taught you, or something that maybe it's realigned your perspective.
Okay. I think it's daunting to put these box sets together. There's a lot of work that has to be done because it's the music, it's visuals, and it's writing, and it's putting it all into a beautiful box. And part of it was when it was first muted, and the discussions were with Domino Records, with Chris Gillespie, who manages the whole project. I just saw 3 beautiful boxes on a wall. I just thought that was a great way of the band. In my mind, these 3 really gorgeous boxes, like treasure chests, that were just there, and it was like, there's the group. I can stand back and I can see them in their 3 colours. They're about that thick. They look gorgeous. Each of them's got 3 albums in them, like with other records, but the career slices beautifully through 3 albums a box. And it's sort of good. I can go back to the Go-Betweens, and I adore the band. I'm the biggest fan. Although by the things I was saying about the records, I wish I'd been a little bit more upbeat. But I'm a fan, and that's the approach that I take to it.
Final question. It's nice that it all is pretty much contained within a decade.
Yeah, that's the perfect thing. It's really spooky, it's very much an 80s band, although in a bizarre way we weren't an 80s band.
No, in many ways it's the antithesis of the 80s band.
Yeah, and but there we were in the decade.